Welcome to Lost Without Japan, a travel podcast about the life-changing experiences of exploring Japan and those moments we would be lost without. For your listening pleasure, allow me to introduce your very own Kanko Guido, Michael.
Welcome to a special Lost Without Moments bonus interview episode of the Lost Without Japan podcast. Our bi-weekly podcast is focused on getting you to Japan for your first visit or to make your next adventure to Japan an even better one. Today's special episode is with Robert Jefferson, also known as the Kamakura gardener, who was brought to my attention by fellow guest of the show, Maurice, while talking to him about his project Ganbate. Robert's life, the example he leads, his positive messages throughout his videos of accepting when things don't go right and focusing in on the things that are, in his year-round projects, as well as his engagement in his community of Kamakura, offers listeners not only some truly wonderful experiences, but also some very unique knowledge when it comes to living in Japan. This is your Director of Travel for TKIC Studio Productions, coming to you with positive thoughts and excitement for your next journey to Japan and his own return this summer. I'd like to thank you all for giving me a bit of your time today, and I truly hope that this podcast finds you in a good place or on the path to a better one, no matter how it may seem at this moment. My belief is that we can all use a beacon like this in our lives to help guide us during these times, and my hope is that Japan, along with this show, will become that for you. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you're returning Lost Without listener, thank you again for your time and returning once more. For today's show, let me introduce our special guest, whose YouTube channel is really just the tip of an iceberg when it comes to his time in Japan. It is truly amazing how one contact from an interview can lead up to getting the chance to talk to another amazing person. I truly feel fortunate to have Robert join us today, and I can't wait to begin our interview. Welcome, Robert.
Good day from Kamakura, Japan, on this beautiful summer day. It's 28 degrees and it's getting humid already.
Thank you so much for making time for our listeners by joining us on today's episode to talk about your time in Japan and share a bit about yourself. Before we get going too far, though, with today's episode, where can listeners go to ask questions about your gardening, living in Japan, and just find your YouTube channel?
On YouTube, I'm known as the Kamakura gardener. Yeah, I can be seen on Patreon. I do have Patreon patrons. I'm in the process of setting up a locals channel. Are you familiar with locals?
I'm not.
Yeah, it's a new platform that doesn't censor as much as YouTube and the other platforms do. I'm on Telegram and Rumble and Odyssey and Bright Eon. Some people say Bright Eon, but it's actually Bright Eon. That's another platform. So brighteon.com, odyssey.com, and patreon.com, rumble.com, and Telegram, t.me. That's where I'm at.
Outstanding. I have a few of those links that that are in the show notes already, and I'll make sure to have them. I took them off the YouTube channel, so I'll have links for that as well as your Patreon. I do thank you again, like I said, for making time today. I want to just give you a chance before we start getting into Japan too much for you to just introduce yourself.
I am a newly minted 63-year-old American, originally from southeastern Pennsylvania, Montgomery County, a little town called Penlyn, Pennllyn. It's about 35 minutes north of Philadelphia. And, well, I've been here in Japan. Let me start now and go backwards. I've been in Japan for coming up on next January will be 42 years. I've been here for about 41 and a half years. I currently work for Japan's public broadcaster, NHK. I am an announcer and news writer for their Newsline, their global television service, Newsline on NHK World TV. Um, Prior to that, and simultaneously, I was with the Tokyo Broadcasting System, Channel 6 here in Tokyo, as doing the same work, basically announcing and news writing. And let's see, what else have I done here? Well, for 13 years until the fall of 2020, I was a adjunct professor at Temple University, Japan. I began teaching media management and then news writing. And then toward the end of my 13-year career there, I was teaching journalism history and journalism ethics. And I'll tell you, with journalism ethics, I had no shortage of material to teach. Prior to that, I was in the United States for about 5.5 years. I moved back to the States when I was 40 years old in 2000, just in time for 9/11. And that was quite a trip. Yeah, I moved back to the States in 2000 and went to work for WHYY, an NPR and PBS affiliate in Philadelphia, my hometown. And then I moved out to the West Coast. I went into media management, working for a small community radio station in Portland, Oregon. And then I moved on to another community radio station at Bellevue Community College, their radio station, KBCS. In Portland, it was KBOO, Community Radio. In Seattle, in Bellevue, Washington, just across the pond, the lake from Seattle. I worked at the Bellevue Community College, KBCS, as a program director and assistant general manager. Now, prior to that, I've done a lot in my career. I've worked for nearly 30 broadcast outlets, but I'll keep it rather succinct. Prior to that, I was with Bloomberg Television here in Tokyo as a newscaster, doing business news and world news, many different things. Before that, well, let me go way back, and then I'll come back up to Bloomberg. I started in broadcasting. I took an interest in broadcasting when I was in high school, 14 years old, ninth grade at Wissahickon Senior High School in Ambler, Pennsylvania. And I took a production course in high school. We had a full-on, full-color, capable television studio in high school, and I used to read the student announcements every morning during homeroom. And when I was 16 years old, I went to work as a production assistant at a radio station. It was both AM and FM, WDAS, AM and FM in Philadelphia, where I learned news production, and I was a production assistant on a talk show, two talk shows actually. One was the breakfast show every Sunday morning, and then an afternoon program, Insight Inner City. And I went to, after graduating from high school, I enrolled at Temple University in Philadelphia, and planning to, get my undergraduate degree and maybe, advanced degrees. But I had a friend of mine, his name was Tony DeLago, who was thinking about joining the Air Force. And he wanted me to sit down with his recruiter, his Air Force recruiter, just to sort of hold his hand, if you will, while he talked to the recruiter about joining the Air Force. And so the recruiter looked at me and says, "Well, what are you planning?" I said, "Well, I'm fine. I'm cool. I've just enrolled at university.
Yeah.
I'm going to become a broadcaster." My dream at the time was to be a war correspondent. We had just come out of the America's war on Vietnam, and I was a news buff by then, so I thought I'd tried my hand at war reporting, but there was no wars. So I thought, after listening to the recruiter, he said to me, "Well, don't you realize that the United States, the Department of Defense has the largest broadcast network in the world?" And I said, "Get out of here." He said, "No, really." And he came back a few weeks later with some material to show me, and it detailed the American Forces Radio and Television Service, AFRTS. And I was just fascinated. And I said, "Well, you really have radio and television stations all around the world?" He says, "Yeah." And I was hooked. And so I dropped out of Temple University after just one semester and enrolled in the United States Air Force. Went to basic training and in San Antonio, Texas, and then I went into tech school, where we learned our trade. And of course, my trade was broadcasting. So I was enrolled in the Defense Information School of Journalism and Public Affairs. And that was, oh, I forget how many weeks it was. It was a very compact, what's the phrase? Um, it was compressed. What would normally take 2 or 3 or 4 years was compressed in just a few short weeks. With continuing education, once you went to your assignment, and the AFRTS, the American Forces Radio and Television Service, is not broadcast in the United States. It's only broadcast overseas. Um, so I continued my education, my broadcast and journalism education at my assignment, which was I was flying on my 19th birthday, June 19th, 1979. I was flying to Turkey. I was assigned. My first assignment was overseas in Turkey, and so I was flying first to Rome, and then to Athens, and then to Adana, Turkey, uh, where Incirlik Air Base, joint air base, Turkish forces and American forces at Incirlik Air Base in southern Turkey. And back then, Pan Am was still flying, TWA was still flying. You could actually smoke on the airplane. People actually dressed up to to get on the airplane. They didn't wear hoodies and shorts and flip flops as they do today. The food was pretty good. Yeah, it was quite exciting. Here I was, 18 years old. I'm sorry, 19 years old, and flying to Europe and then to the Middle East. So my second assignment was, well, let me stop.
Yeah.
So much here. Um, so I was in Turkey for 15 months. That's how long the tour of duty was there, and I was reporting on what was going on then. Uh, Ronald Reagan was elected president. Jimmy Carter was defeated. Jimmy Carter was my first commander in chief, and then it was Ronald Reagan. The assassination of Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, I reported on that from Turkey, of course. What else was going on? Oh, a lot of things. I left Turkey a week before a military coup d'etat, and I was heading to Lodges Field, the Azores, Portugal. And the Portuguese say Azores. The Azores, it's an archipelago of islands about 1,000 miles off the coast of Portugal. And that was another 15-month assignment. Again, reporting on, what we did as broadcasters was basically mimic what you would see back in the United States. At that time, satellite television, cable television was in its infancy. CNN was called the Chicken Noodle Network. And so we had to replicate local news, what you would see on your local news TV stations, plus the network news. And at that time, ABC, CBS, and NBC. So we would replicate what people would normally see, what the soldiers and airmen and Marines and whoever and their families would see back in the States. We replicated that on base. Sometimes it was broadcast on cable through the base cable system, and other times it was actually broadcast over the air. In Portugal, in Turkey, it was broadcast on cable, but in Portugal, in the Azores, it was broadcast over the air. So
Okay.
the local community could actually watch the channel as well. So after my tour of duty in Portugal, I was assigned to Tokyo, Japan, the Far East Network in Tokyo, and spent 2 years at the Far East Network. FEN is called. And from there, I just fell in love with Japan. And oh gosh, I'm a lot of memories are coming back now. Um, I didn't live on base like most military members did. I rented first a house off base and commuted. I bought a car and commuted to work every day, and then I moved into Tokyo actually, and would commute by car, which I still do here. Living in Kamakura, I drive all the way to Tokyo every day that I work. I didn't want to be bound by all of the military rules and whatnot, I was allowed to. We were allowed to live off base, so I would wear my civilian clothes to and fro, and when I got to the base, to my television station, I would change into my military uniform, and we would actually broadcast the news in uniform. Um, but I just fell in love with Japan and knew that was going to stay for a long time, and obviously I did 42 years ago. And when I left the Air Force, and when my contract was finished, I actually extended my contract for 1 year to come to Japan. So I did 5 years instead of 4. And suddenly my contract was ended. I didn't have a visa because military members don't have visas. We don't need passports. We have a military ID card under the Status of Forces Agreement between countries that American troops and airmen are stationed in. And so I had to get a passport, and then I had to fly to South Korea, nearby South Korea, to get a tourist visa, and then I had to find a job. So I spent 3 months with no income. Luckily, I was living in a house at the time, and my landlady, she was really nice. I was living in Tokyo, and um, uh, she had faith in me, and I was doing some voice acting work. I did some overdubbing for a film. Are you familiar with the Tora-san movie series?
I am not. I
About an
saw.
itinerant traveler, Tora-san.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, about an itinerant traveler, very popular. And so I did voice acting. I was the voice of a temple priest, an abbot. Um, and while at the Far East Network, um, people tuned in. And as I said before, this was before the days of CNN and cable news and Fox and all of that. So we were the only thing in town as far as news and entertainment, American news, English language news and entertainment, music. I had a jazz program every Sunday called the Jazz Spectrum. So for news and information, financial news and all of that, people tuned into the Far East Network. So my reputation followed me, and I was hired at the Tokyo Broadcasting System, TBS, Channel 6, um, to be a news announcer. The evening news, and this is what I do at NHK Today, we get the scripts in advance in Japanese. We have a staff of translators and simultaneous interpreters. And so it's all translated and rewritten. And that was my job to rewrite the news. And then we go on the air live. It's called bilingual news. So when you're watching TV in a sub channel, you hear English, and in the regular channel, you hear the Japanese. So I was hired to do that at the Tokyo Broadcasting System. And that was in 1984. I left the Air Force in December of 1983, and in April of 1984, I was hired at TBS. And I was there for 2 years, and I was 24 or 25, and I decided I needed to do something more. I needed to challenge myself. So I moved to Hawaii and became a broadcaster there. I was a reporter, announcer for KHVH News Radio, and then KGU Talk Radio 76, the voice of Hawaii. And then I came back to Japan with ABC News. ABC News hired me to be their Tokyo radio correspondent, actually, the correspondent for Northeast Asia and Japan. So I covered Japan and all of Northeast Asia, including the Korean Peninsula, North and South Korea. And I was there. That was in 1987, October of 1987. The stock market had just crashed on a Monday, Black Monday, and I arrived in Japan on Friday. And immediately, as soon as they had a driver at the airport, at Narita Airport, who had holding up a sign with my name on it. They had a car and everything, and then it drove me back to Tokyo. And the car even had a cell phone in it. Now, cell phones weren't around back then. Nobody was carrying them around, but they did have them in cars, and very wealthy people had them. And so I asked the chauffeur, "Can I use the phone?" He said, "Sure, that's what it's there for you to use." So I figured out how to use it and made a call to the bureau first, and then later I called some friends saying I'm back.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, so arrived at the ABC News bureau, and New York called and they wanted a story on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, and I'm carrying bags up the elevator to the bureau. I didn't even have a place to stay. I didn't have a hotel room or anything. And when I walked into the bureau, they showed me my office, my desk, and they had name cards already prepared sitting on the desk, and they showed me around, introduced me to everyone, and then I wrote a story on the stock market and filed the story and did a voice recording of the script that I wrote. And for the first time in my life, I signed off saying Robert Jefferson, ABC News, Tokyo, which was my dream. Peter Jennings of ABC News, he was my hero, someone I really looked up to. Him and Frank Reynolds and Max Robinson, who was the first black anchorman. So the three of them, they had a tripartite newscast. Frank Reynolds was the main anchor in Washington D.C. Max Robinson, he was out of Chicago, your hometown, and Peter Jennings was based in London. And it was one of the most fascinating network newscasts ever. I don't think it's ever been matched. It was just fantastic. Peter Jennings would cover international affairs. Max would cover national affairs, and Frank Reynolds in Washington, the main anchor, he anchored the whole program. And yeah, so I was with ABC News for 8 years, and simultaneously, I got a call one day from the West German public broadcaster Deutsche Welle, and they wanted me to be their correspondent in Tokyo as well. So I was both the ABC News correspondent and the Deutsche Welle uh, correspondent. And I also got a call. It was just fabulous. I'd get a call, there's no email back then. It was everything was done by phone and fax. And got a call from a Japanese television company, Japan Cable Television, JCTV, and they hired me to do weekend news. Their main weekday anchor, he was sort of my senpai, my elder in the business. He was also in the military. I believe he was in the Air Force and maybe the Army. Frank Rogers was his name, and he liked what he had seen me do, so he suggested that they hire me to do the weekend news at Japan Cable Television. So yeah, I was their weekend television news anchor there, and it was a lot of fun. Japan was in its economic bubble years, and I had like 7 different jobs, but I was making tons of money, but I wasn't even working full time. So I had a lot of free time. I hung out in all the jazz clubs and bars and whatnot. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then the bubble burst, but things weren't so bad. I was a voice actor, narrator, and you may have heard of the Shenmue video series. Yeah,
Oh yes.
I did the voice of Mr. Iwao-san, who had a son, um, and yeah, I actually, two of my Patreon patrons were fans of Shenmue, and yeah, I did a lot of voice work, TV commercials, and such. I even had a modeling career. So yeah, the ABC News. I left ABC in 1995, and I left on a rather interesting note because in January we had the Kobe earthquake, and I filed quite a few stories, especially for ABC local affiliates, especially on the West Coast. And then, when was it? Was it in March of '95? The sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway system. I covered that quite a bit as well. And I was living in Tokyo at the time, and luckily, I was scheduled to do some work on that day, and I would have been on one of those subways, but for some reason, it was switched to another day, so I wasn't on the subway that day. That the sarin gas attack happened. A religious cult, Om Shinrikyo, carried out this dastardly attack on the subway system. killing a number of people. So then after that, I left. I was still at in television and broadcasting at TBS, and I also worked as a marketing manager at it was a combination of a restaurant and a nightclub called the Soul Train Cafe. And it got shut down because they didn't get permission from Don Cornelius, who was the owner of the Soul Train TV show. Um, so that had to be shut down. And then I was hired at Bloomberg Television in Japan in 1997, and I was with them. It was in September of 1997, and I stayed with them until I think it was February of 2000. I left them and went back to the States. So I think I've brought that full circle.
Love it all. I mean, like, there's so much to go through, and I am like Maurice, a fan of Shenmue. That's one of the first things that we started talking and connected with before we actually got to talking about anything else. So I'm impressed as well. That had to be doing all of that voice work had to be pretty interesting or unique in its way. Is it similar in any way to what you were doing for broadcasting, or how did all of the voice acting go for you?
Well, yeah, it's very similar. You go into a recording studio, and you were dealing with microphones and scripts and things like that. The Shenmue work, I had to go out to their studios, and it was off the beaten path somewhere. So I had to take a train and then a taxi and something, and it was an all-day affair. Actually, I think it was a couple that I had to go back, and it was very tough on my voice because I had to sound like an older man, and my character had a son, and this was 30 some odd years ago, so I'm forgetting a lot of it, but yes, I had to sound like an old man, and and it really destroyed my voice. I was coughing, and I had my throat was very raw for quite some time after that. But I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Lost in Translation with Bill Murray.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
that
it's
is.
very similar to that. Yeah, and strangely enough, that movie was set in Tokyo. But yeah, I've done TV commercials, and it's not easy to go in and say, yes, Rico, like, 50 times. You have to do take after take, and Asahi, super dry. I was the second voice for that commercial. A friend of mine, he was the first voice, and I was the second voice. And it paid very well. Very well. I won't say exactly how much. The tax office knows, but it paid very well. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
How did you end up getting into voice acting?
I was heard on the Far East Network, FEN, every day. So we were a hot commodity. The broadcasters were. Not everyone took advantage of it. Not everyone could, I guess, but those who had the voice that the Japanese liked, yeah, we were gotten in touch with. There was one man, and I doubt if he could be still alive. He was a Filipino. His name was Leo Leonard, and he hired me to do a lot of voice work. And he had been in Japan for many years, the post-war years and through the 60s and 70s and 80s. And he had made a very good name for himself as as a talent scout and as a broker. And he would pay in cash, which was
Even better.
yeah. And I came to Japan before there were ATMs. I remember the first ATM, and they had to have a guy standing there to teach everyone how to use the ATM. But yeah, Leo, he would pay in cash. Most others, it was done by bank transfer. It
Okay.
still is done by bank transfer much later. But yeah, my phone would ring, and they would say, "Hi, I'm so and so of such and such, and we like your voice, and we'd like you to do this, that, and the other." I was offered radio shows. I had a 1 year contract with FM Yokohama, and the sponsor of my program was Alpine, the car audio maker. The name of the program was Alpine Seaside Shuttle. And it was an afternoon program featuring romantic music, sort of like soul music, romantic music. And then another radio station in Kobe, Kiss FM Kobe, NTT, the telephone company, sponsored my program. NTT, Urban Night Call, One in a Million. That was the name of the program. and and yeah, I did that for 2 years and never once went to Kobe. It was recorded in Tokyo. I just pretended that I was in Kobe. I still have some cassette tapes somewhere around here. I have to get them dubbed over into digital now. Everything's changed so much. But yeah, I would just get a phone call. Yeah, and then well, it was about the late '90s when email and the internet finally came online, and that changed the things a lot. Yeah, but yeah, it was basically by word of mouth, literally and figuratively.
Well, and can you like thinking back to that time when you did, like you said earlier, that you decided that Japan was a place that you wanted to be, and you're there. What was it about your surroundings? What was it about your experience that was that deciding factor for you? Like, I want to be here for a while.
I think it went back to my childhood. Back in the '60s, I remember the cartoons, the TV shows, Speed Racer.
Yes.
When I was a kid, I didn't know when I was watching it, I didn't know that it was in Japan. The Japanese title was Maha Agoro. Maha is a Japanese rendition of the term Mach, like
Okay.
speed,
Yes.
Mach 5 or whatever, to break the sound barrier. And I don't remember what Speed Racer's name was in Japan, but a lot of those programs were Japanese animation. And then as I grew older into my teen years, I realized that where it came from, and I always had an affinity. When I was growing up in my small town, there was a woman married to an American, and she was from Yokohama. Her name was Fusae, a Japanese woman, and I found her quite interesting. Her children were biracial, and they weren't bilingual. They didn't learn much Japanese. They a few words here and there. Um, but Japan, the sushi craze, the audio craze. Uh, Everyone, when I was growing up, when I was a teenager in the 1970s, everyone, all of us wanted a nice stereo system, Kenwood or Sansui or Yamaha or whatever. And, we were willing to pay hundreds of dollars, for our sound system. So yeah, earlier back in the '60s, I think Japan got a bad rap. You look at the bottom of something and it would say "made in Japan" and people would laugh at it. But the Japanese really worked hard to reverse that and come up with some really good products. But when I stepped off the airplane between after my stint in Portugal, I went back to the United States on vacation on leave actually, and I was just so excited to come here. I was a chartered flight. I think it was TWA, and we landed. We didn't land at Haneda or Narita. We landed at Yokota Air Base, and and some of my colleagues from Portugal, people I worked with in Portugal, people I worked with in Turkey, were waiting for me. They had arrived prior to my arrival. They were working here, and they brought a mobile camera unit to record my arrival. And I was like, "Get out of here! Stop!" you know. So I'm standing, and they push this, those ladder trucks or stair trucks up to the side of the plane, and we walk down the stairs, and I'm looking at it. Is that Mel and Marcia? Oh my God, look at that. That's Tim. And they were recording me coming down the stairs. Yeah. And so it was a nice little reunion. But when I stood at the top of those stairs, I looked out and I said, wow, this is Tokyo. It was the suburbs of Tokyo. But I said, wow, this is Japan. And I said to myself, this is going to be interesting. And just one day after another, I mean, nothing got boring. you know, I registered to get a military license, and I still have it. It's in my safe here. I should have pulled it out. Actually, it was a piece of paper, a little bit about this size, and I still have it. And it was just a piece of paper. It wasn't even laminated. And and driving on the wrong side of the road, sitting on the wrong side of the car, and and I was on base. I didn't dare go off base; it was too scary. So I thought I'd practice, driving on the wrong side, sitting on the wrong side on base. And sure enough, I was driving down the wrong side of the road, and somebody tooted their horn at me and flashed their lights, and I swerved back over to the right side again. So I got used to that real quick, and then I said, "The heck with it, screw it, I'm going off base," and I went off base, and everything was okay. Although one time I did get lost, and I was driving around for like 3 hours lost. All the signs, the road signs were in Japanese, and I tried stopping. I couldn't speak any Japanese, and I tried stopping and asking someone. They couldn't understand me. I couldn't understand them. And then finally, I found a police box called a koban. And there are these little community stations it's a police box. It's a little cabin-like thing. I don't want to say a hut, but yeah, where police have a station, a small station in communities to for patrols and settling any disputes or whatever. So I found this police koban and went in there and did a pantomime because he couldn't speak English, I couldn't speak Japanese, and he finally pointed me back in the right direction. Over the years, I think it was not too long after that, there was a strong push to internationalize, and so they put all of the road signs in Roman letters because it was a huge scandal that people couldn't read the Chinese characters on the signs. So now, yeah, nearly all of the road signs have Roman characters. But yeah, it was just day after day, something brand new, something fascinating. Everything was so high tech, so futuristic. It was just unbelievable, unbelievable.
With all of that and what caught your attention and how everything was new, and then your experience, getting lost and not being able to, read the signs or things that were going on, was that what made you decide to start learning Japanese, or was there something else that led to you finally getting to where you are today?
Well, yeah, not being able to communicate was tough. The first 2 years was really tough. I was able to meet people, but if they couldn't speak English, and I obviously couldn't speak Japanese, it was a bit tough. I would learn by listening. I met some wonderful friends, and some of them are still friends to this day. And I would go out to bars or to parties or other social events, and I would just listen intently, just to see, just to pick up words and pick up phrases. When I was driving, I would, especially at a stoplight, I would look around at the road signs, the advertising signs and billboards and whatnot, and learn the characters, like Honda and Toyota or whatever. Just to learn the Chinese character or the Japanese characters, the hiragana and katakana, just by looking at road signs. And I still do that today, actually. Um, but yeah, so just learning how, just listening to hear how people speak in normal everyday conversations. Because when you pick up a language book, um, you're not really, if you pick up a Japanese language book, it'll get you on your way to learning Japanese. But a lot of the phrases in these books, it's not normal everyday Japanese, but it's a good start. You have to learn how to count, the counting system. For example, counting, like pens and papers. Ippon, nihon, sambon, yonhon. And the pronunciation changes. Ippon, nihon, sambon. Or isatsu, counting pieces of paper. Isatsu, nisatsu, sansatsu. To learn those things, you need to have book learning is great, But to really learn Japanese, and especially pronunciation, you really have to have a good ear. A lot of people will say, for example, they'll pronounce the Japanese capital with three syllables. It only has two, Tokyo, and it's a long. The to is long, Tokyo. The kyo is shorter than the o in Tokyo. A lot of Americans will say Hiroshima when it's Hiroshima. Each of these syllables should be pronounced. And then there are tricks here and there. There's a place in Tokyo called Asakusa. When you look at it, it looks like it says Asakusa, but that middle syllable is almost silent. Asakusa. The ku is silent. And there's a city not too far from me, Yokosuka, but it's pronounced Yokosuka. So you have to learn these things, and sometimes the book or the audio will teach you. Sometimes they won't. I did. Trying to remember what year it was. I think, yeah, for visa purposes. I said before that I had to fly to South Korea to establish a visa status. So I started out with a tourist visa, and then I came back to Japan. Then I had to fly back to Seoul again, Seoul, South Korea again, to get a student visa. I had enrolled in a language school, the Sendagaya Japanese Language Institute in Tokyo, and I took a 3-month intensive course. It was 5 days a week, 9 hours a day for 3 months, and that taught me a lot. I didn't become fluent, but it really taught me the basics of the language. I don't even consider myself fluent now. I get by. Actually, I guess I am to a certain extent, but I never married. I live alone with little Haru-chan. I've had dogs, but it's not that I don't like human companionship. It's just I like things done my way. So, I've had roommates and partners and whatnot, but yeah. So I don't speak Japanese constantly. I do speak Japanese almost every day, but I'm not. Yeah, I don't have anyone to talk to, and that's why I listen to podcasts a lot in English because I don't have anyone to talk to. So I need that English stimulation in my ears, or I'm watching something on YouTube. I don't watch television, but I do watch YouTube because there's a whole world of stuff out there. I can watch people doing things in countries that I haven't yet visited, and I've been around. The only places I haven't been are Africa and South America. So learning Japanese, it can be fun. It can be tedious. Sometimes it could be boring even, but it's what you make of it. Oh, one thing I did do back when I did watch television, I would watch a lot of it, especially the cartoons. There was, and I don't mean the not so much the cartoons for children, but for families. And what was it? Every Saturday. Have you ever seen Sazai-san?
I have not.
Yeah, it's about a family. I don't know if it's Tokyo or somewhere, but it's a typical. It could be anywhere in Japan because the cities, a lot of them look pretty much the same. But it's a typical Japanese family, multi-generational. The husband and wife, and the husband's parents, and the children. They all live under the same roof. The husband and his father are working, and the wife, she stays home and takes care of the kids and all that. But you see, how you can hear how Japanese interact at home, among the family, at work, outdoors, in the neighborhood, in the community. And so, yeah, you can learn a lot by watching such programs. Um, and listening to the news when I broadcast in English, I'm wearing a single earphone, sort of like a headphone, but only one, like you're wearing, but it's only one side, and I'm listening to Japanese. Nowadays, I'm not wearing a headphone; it's an earpiece. that I listen to, but I have the Japanese in my ear. I have to keep pace with the Japanese announcer. This is live. So yeah, and I've learned that way. I've learned a lot of news lingo by simply by the work that I do. And the way people speak in a news broadcast is not quite the same as people speak in normal conversation. If I were to speak on my YouTube channel the way I speak on the air, I wouldn't have any subscribers. Or maybe I'd have 100,000 when I get my silver,
That's right.
my silver button and all that. I don't know. But yeah, it's just different. But yeah, it's for me, almost coming up on 42 years, and I'm still learning. Yeah, I didn't, reading, and I can thank God for the computers now, and Google Translate. Back in the day, we didn't have all that, so yeah, you had to learn the old-fashioned way, and there was no translation app or anything like that. So yeah, I had to learn the old-fashioned way. But yeah, I'm still learning now. But I can handle, you can go to my channel and see when I got my new car that I had to wait 7 months for because of supply chain issues and computer chip shortages. But yeah, I can handle the car dealership, the tax office. Yesterday, I went and had some dental work done, and things like that. I can do all in Japanese. I may not know all of the vocabulary, but I get the I get the gist of what's being said. And sometimes like I say, every day I learn something new, a new word or new vocabulary. So yeah, it can seem a little bit intimidating in the beginning, but yeah, you get out of it what you put into it.
Robert, we could, I think, talk for hours on end, just about everything, from your life and just the being there in general. But I do want to get us moved on a bit to your YouTube channel and
Mhm.
your the Kamakura gardener. And have you always loved gardening? Was there something that ended up getting you into the hobby when you were in Japan? What led to all of this for you?
The gardening that began when I was a child, back in that little town, little village I lived in Penland, Pennsylvania. My neighbor across the street, Mrs. Cotton, Mrs. Daisy Susan Cotton, she was a gardener, and she used to recruit me and my twin sister and some of the other kids our age to help her garden, to weed and to plant her garden. And she always had some little sweets and candies and cookies and some good food that she would share with us. So it was a lot of fun, planting her. She had a flower garden out front and had a vegetable patch in the back, helping her plant her tomatoes and her squash and picking her strawberries. And it was just so much fun. I'd be out there in the morning when the grass was still covered with dew and she was just, waking up. I was so eager to do it. Um, and then for many years, I didn't do any gardening when I was here in Japan before. When I came back to Japan, second time after having lived in the States, I watched a lot of home and garden television, and that's where the gardening bug came back. But it didn't really bite me until I got back here, and I was living in Tokyo at the time, and I was living in an apartment, and I started gardening on my balcony in containers. And then when I moved here to this place in Kamakura, when I moved here, I was thinking, my God, I'll just turn all of this patio space, I have an upper terrace and a lower terrace. I thought I can do my gardening here. And, I moved here in 2007, and YouTube, I don't even think YouTube was a thing then. My first YouTube upload, oh, when was that? 2016, and I wasn't very serious about it. The iPhone had just come out, and the cameras, they weren't as good as they are now. But it wasn't as easy to make YouTube videos when I first moved here. So yeah, if you go back and look at the first two, it was just shot on an old iPhone, and the quality isn't very good. But it was around 2017 that I uploaded my first two, but it wasn't until 2020 that I started uploading regularly, that I really got serious about it. I was 59 and I had decided to quit drinking. I had quit smoking when I was 39, going on 40. And so I decided to quit drinking alcohol when I was 59, going on 60. And sort of as a catharsis, I really got into making YouTube videos. The gardening I had been doing, and it's odd, I seem to have more success before I started doing YouTube. I was growing carrots and onions, and I can't get them to grow now.
Uh,
I've got pictures, wonderful pictures. I wasn't, vlogging then, but yeah, I've got wonderful pictures of wonderful harvests. But yeah, well, last year wasn't. I had some successes and a lot of failures. This year, I'm doing better. Actually, I'm going to go out and I've been harvesting a lot of cucumbers, and I'm going to go out and harvest some tomatoes, some cherry and plum tomatoes that are ripening now. But yeah, it's very cathartic. It's very therapeutic, um, to start with a little tiny seed and see it sprout and grow and then become a fruit or a vegetable. My winter cabbages did absolutely fantastically, and then I tried to grow some in the spring, and the bugs just, had a feast. You know? Yeah. Yeah, I could see them coming with their tucking their napkins, and and sitting down having a feast on my hard work. So yeah, that was a big mistake. Don't grow cabbages in Japan, or at least in my area, in the spring. Wait until the autumn when the bugs are gone. But yeah, it was anyway. Yeah, Daisy Susan Cotton, and she was a wonderful woman, and her husband Jesse, and they were Christians, and I was a bit skeptical, and they said, "Well, Bobby," they called me. You just got to have faith, you know? And I have always been curious. I've studied Islam. I've studied Buddhism, but I never settled on any or on any of them. But I've taken the good from all of them. Tried to incorporate that into my life, and create, especially vlogs that are wholesome and informative. I try not to be preachy about what I do because I'm not a professional gardener. For me, it's one huge experiment that just goes on, day after day, week after week, month and years, and it's a lot of fun and meeting people. Not so much physically, although next month I have my first meet and greet on the 13th of July. A woman, a Patreon patron, and her husband are coming, and I'm going to meet them. I got an email from a Japanese woman who lives in my prefecture, and she was asking if I would be willing to meet up. So yeah, it's wonderful, even just virtual friendships that I've formed
yes.
with people on other channels, and then they've checked out my channel, and then they see me on another channel, commenting on another channel that we mutually watch. I wake up early. In here in the spring and summer, my alarm goes off at 3:15 in the morning, 3:15 a.m. I go to bed. I'm in bed. I'm in my bedroom at about 7 in the evening, sometimes as early as 6. And I'm winding down between 7 and 8. I'm asleep at 8. And I like that those circadian rhythms of going to bed when the sun sets and then waking up just before the sun rises and seeing the sky slowly brighten. With all of the light pollution here, though, the sky doesn't get totally dark, and that bothers me. That we've switched to LED lighting here in Japan, and that's just I don't see the the constellations. I don't see Orion and Ursula Major and all of the other constellations as well as I used to before we switched to LED lighting. But it's still nice to go to bed early and to wake up early, and it's just done wonders for my health. Plus stopping drinking. I wasn't drinking a whole lot, but once the pandemic hit, and I was still at university then, but teaching online from home, and buying alcohol online. And I looked at my trash one day and I said, oh God, there's too many bottles. Did I drink all of that? And April 30th, I had no more. April 30th, 2020, I had my last drink. And it was nothing ceremonious. I just looked at myself in the mirror and thought deeply and said, what am I doing? And no more. Uh, I didn't need AA or any other group like that. It's something that I had to do from within, and I'm glad I did. And I had always been going on nature hikes. I did that as a child as well, and with my dogs, I would go on hikes here in Kamakura. But now I do it, the weather permitting, every morning, weather and work permitting. Sometimes I work overnight into the mornings, or but even tomorrow morning, I have to be at work I start at 8, which means I have to leave home just before 6 a.m. because the morning commute, it takes 2 hours to drive into Tokyo. I mean, what normally takes an hour and 5-10 minutes will take 2 hours in the morning commute. But I will go for my morning walk 5 kilometers before I drive in. I think there is an awakening going on. People are thinking, there's a better way to live than simply, being consumers. There's nothing better than, biting into a cucumber you've grown yourself, or squishing a little cherry or plum tomato between your teeth that came off the vine, out in your garden. I grow mint, spearmint, and every time that I fill up my my thermos with tea, I put a sprig of mint in it, and that I've clipped from my garden. It's just it's it's very cleansing, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically cleansing, and it's nice. Yeah.
I know that we could go on for a lot just talking about the videos and things that are there, but I'm just going to ask that listeners or viewers take some time and check out the channel. Like I said, I'm going to have a YouTube link there, and I've just begun even myself where it's commenting and I can see your community that you already have in place, and it's it's really nice. It is super nice to see. And then especially I'm sure that Haru, your YouTube partner in crime, has to be a fan favorite as well. What can you tell me about her and her involvement in everything that's going on?
Well, Haru came into my life on March 24th. It was her 2-month birthday. No, March 24th. Yeah, I think so. Anyway, I had lost my previous Boston Terriers. The most recently was Spunky.
Yes.
He died at 14 years, and the day before he died, he hang in there. He went out for a walk with me, and a few years before that, his partner Bebe, my first dog, she died. So yes, I lost Spunky in July of 2022, and the next 7 months were quite lonely. To hear the little pitter patter of feet, on the floor, and just coming home from work and being greeted at the and at the door by Spunky or Bebe. It was lonely, So I had gone to the pet shop at the home center, little local mall, and sort of suggested to the pet shop attendant, any Boston Terriers, any coming in the near future? She said, well, we don't really know what what breed we're going to be getting. You just have to come back and check from time to time. And something one morning, somebody said, go and check. And I got in the car and went over there, and sure enough, Haru was there. Although she wasn't Haru.
Yes.
I had to come up with a name very quick when filling out the forms and the insurance and yeah, the pet insurance and there was a line, a space that said name, and I looked at the attendant, the pet store clerk, and said, oh, it's spring, Haru.
Love it.
So yeah, I didn't, and I wanted actually I wanted to think about the name, to look, to judge her personality, and because that's how I named Spunky, because he was just so full of spunk, nothing was afraid. He wasn't afraid of anything except thunder, the sound of thunder. But yeah, Haru just popped into my mind, and it's a good choice, I think. Yeah, she's a breath of fresh air. She's just as fresh as spring, and yeah, she's downstairs because otherwise she would be just attacking my legs. And she would be all over me. So she's downstairs playing with a rope. And yeah, so it's nice to have a pet here in the house again. Yeah, they especially Boston Terriers. They bring a lot of joy. They're very loving, very funny, very smart, um, very loyal. The unconditional love from a dog. Yeah, I like small dogs because they can't hurt me. I was bitten by a dog when I was young. It was a German Shepherd, and I would never have a dog with a big mouth. Never again. Yeah. So yeah, the tiny dogs, and they're easier to take care of and feed and clean up after, and yeah. So yeah, Boston Terriers. I would have nothing else. Yeah, and they're quiet. They don't bark. As I don't like the little yapping dogs. Yeah, Boston Terriers are they're mine.
Love it. Love it. What could you tell me about your show's Patreon, and then just the community that you have and all the support that you receive?
I When I upload a vlog, I upload it there first. If there's any special that I do, I try to put it there first as well. It's the patrons at Patreon are those who enjoy what creators do and just want to support them um, um, in any way they can, monetarily. Some are there are certain tiers, and some it's at $3 or $5, $9. Then there's a VIP. I think it's at $25, and it helps in the what 2 years that I have been in the 2 years that my patrons have been supporting me, my Sony camera. The money that I've received from them will have paid for the camera and some other accessories. Accessories such as my microphone, my Rhodes microphone, and things like that. Yeah, it's just gratitude for the work for the creations that I put out. Yeah, so 12 patrons, and yeah, I mean, I still have to go to work
Yes, yes, yes.
and pay my bill, but it does help. All of us, we start out small, and it takes years. I'm not doing it for the money, although that's in the back of my mind. It'd be nice to, when I'm 63 now, when I get to about 70, it'll be about 10 years. So I'm hoping that I could that I could retire from broadcasting and simply do vlogging.
Yes.
And if not, I don't want to retire, but maybe reduce it working to a few days a week, and to have my YouTube vlog as well. Yeah, I would it's to actually retire and do what?
Yes.
Garden?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. What you're going to be doing anyways, right?
Yeah.
I love it, Robert. Before we get into just some goals and things like that, we're nearing our end. I've already taken up a great deal of your time, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it all. I could totally see having you back on again, just even to talk more about your channel. But is there anything that you would want to bring up at this time that we haven't covered to this point in our interview?
Well, for people who are thinking of coming to Japan or coming back to Japan, come. It's one of the few places where it's relatively safe, and the people are really good people. Generally speaking, they're helpful, they're kind, and you don't have to spend a whole lot of it. Japan can be done on the cheap.
Yes.
And I think there are even some YouTube channels out there to show you how, 500 yen a day or 1,000 yen a day. And yeah, you can get by cheaply. It's not that expensive. You don't have to spend an arm and, chop off an arm and a leg or donate a kidney, to get some money to come here and enjoy it. If you're planning on moving here, prepare yourself. Learn what you need to learn. Follow the rules, follow the customs, follow the law, especially.
Yes.
But yeah, do everything right, and everything will fall into place.
Love it. What are your goals for the rest of 2023?
Gardening.
Yes.
Yeah, I just planted another round of cucumbers. I'm debating. Well, it's here we are in just the beginning of summer here. I might have time to grow some melons, some cantaloupes, or something like that, to plan my fall and winter garden. Otherwise, I don't travel much. I haven't been on an airplane since I came back to Japan in 2006. I've been everywhere. I've been to the Maldives. I've been to Singapore, 2 or 3 times. I've been to Taiwan. I've been to Sri Lanka. I've been around. So yeah, I'm not too interested in traveling. I've been around Japan. I've been to the most northern island of Hokkaido. I've been to the southernmost prefecture of Okinawa. Some places I haven't been, some places in Japan I haven't been. So I may take Haru with me and we may get in the car and drive somewhere. Uh, but yeah, the most important thing for me is as I get older, I realize that I have to take care of my health.
Yes.
That's why I walk every morning, and I practice things such as intermittent fasting, where I stop eating. Uh, I don't eat anything after 5 p.m. and I don't eat again until after 9 a.m. Uh, and and then I'll have only one large meal, somewhere between 9 and 10, and then in the afternoon I'll have some light snacks, nuts and fruits and things like that. And but I do have varied work schedules, so sometimes I do eat in the evening, like overnights. I won't eat during the day, and then when I go into work, I work from 11 at night till 8 o'clock in the morning. So between 11 and midnight, I'll have my dinner, and then again, somewhere around 5 in the morning, I'll have a salad, and then around 6 or 7, I'll have a fruit salad with yogurt or something like that, and then I'm done for the rest of the day. So yeah, keeping my weight under control. Uh, I've brought down my high blood pressure. My liver is fine. My kidneys are fine. I don't have any health issues whatsoever. So that was a goal of 3 years ago, and I've attained that goal of getting my hepatic functions and and my cardiac issues resolved. So yeah, so for the rest of the year, and we only have 6 more months. God, the year's halfway through now. Just to enjoy the seasons. Yeah, no major goals. Yeah, to continue putting out content that people like to watch, that puts a smile on people's faces.
Robert, I can't thank you enough. Some of your videos and things with cooking have me ready to make a late dinner myself. I love watching you cook, you interact, you garden, and everything that's going on in your life. And I look forward to continue seeing different things you have coming out with that. So just thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, please give a follow, a like, and a comment on your favorite streaming service. And for updates on the show, feel free to give a follow on Instagram at Lost Without Japan. And remember, you may find Robert on his YouTube channel, the Kamakura Gardener. Again, links and everything will be in our show notes for all the different platforms that he talked about. Truly appreciate those of you that support the show through Patreon. And I want to give a quick shout out to our newest member, Blake. Thank you so much for, giving something, some support and just saying thanks and reaching out. It's going to help add even more audio equipment for Japan. And my goal is to have as many different sounds from Japan and some other interviews that I do while I'm there be shared with you. So thank you again, Robert, for joining us today. I truly do appreciate it. On behalf of Lost Without Japan and the entire crew, I'd like to thank you for joining us today for this interview. And we look forward to seeing you on board again for our next regularly scheduled episode as we continue our discussion on Japan, travel, culture, and your Lost Without moments. To everyone out there, o genki de. Stay well, my friends.